if you would allow me, let me give you a little background on Clayton, and I'm just reading, so forgive me. Clayton was born in Vicksburg, Mississippi in 1941, graduated from Neville High School in Monroe, Louisiana in 1959. Sorry, we have to mention those dates. And went on to a successful collegiate career at the University of Houston, where he graduated in 1963. In 1970, he was elected to membership in the PGA of America, thus beginning an illustrious career as one of the finest players, finest teachers, administrators in Colorado golf history. Clayton's roots in Colorado golf go back to 1970, when he was hired as an assistant professional at Cherry Hills, a position he held until 1974. The Dallas Country Club made Clayton its head professional in 1974, and he stayed there until 1986. From 86 to 91, Clayton served as the director of golf at the Hills of Lakeway in Austin before returning to Cherry Hills in 1991. Upon entering semi-retirement in 2008, Clayton was given an honorary membership at Cherry Hills and became just the fifth person presented a red jacket, joining people such as Dwight Eisenhower, Arnold Palmer, Jay Siegel, and Warren Smith. Throughout Clayton's career, he has played a leadership role in the PGA sections in the states that he has lived, serving on the board of both the North Texas and Colorado PGA sections. Clayton's playing record includes participating in 12 national championships, including the U.S. Open, PGA Championship, U.S. Senior Open, and PGA Senior Championship, as well as the U.S. Amateur. Clayton did much more than simply show up for many of these events. He qualified as well as made the cut on a number of them. Clayton is also highly regarded for his mentoring of fellow PGA professionals. In fact, in 2009, he became the first member of the Colorado PGA to receive the National Bill Strasbaugh Award, which is given by the PGA of America for exemplary mentoring. And Clayton, let's start with that mentoring aspect. You've been a tremendous judge of talent. You've had a great number of assistants who've moved on to head professional, director of golf, GM positions. What are the specific traits that you're looking for when you are hiring an assistant?
Well, I look for traits and activities and results. And so I know we're going to talk a little bit about modelinetics later, but this is one of the things that you judge people by, and the traits of, do they show up on time, and are they disciplined, and just is there a fit? Because I know whenever anyone that has worked for me goes to another job, my big question is, do they fit that job they're applying for? And so I think that's important, that the person fits that job and working with the people in that environment. So I look for that, and I look for the activities. What activities have they done in the past? What kind of leadership roles they've done? Have they graduated from college? I got that from the PGA of America. I was at a seminar one time, and the people that have graduated from college tend to stick through the PGA program and finish what they started. And so I said, well, I think I'll start doing that. I've had more success since I did that. That's maybe left out a few very talented people that maybe did not get a degree, but I just kind of liked what I heard in that PGA workshop about the percent of success, so I was going with the odds. And then the results of how they've done at their past jobs and how they are, what player I think playing is an important part at Cherry Hills. Some clubs it's not as important because the industry has changed a tremendous amount. So those are kind of the things I focus on, and then I do try to have a balanced staff where I don't want a bunch of dominant people in one room or too many influential and steady. Those are the three I look for because I'm too much on the compliance side, so I don't want more than one of those.
Understandably, you speak of that fit of them in their next position, which goes back to, in speaking with a number of the assistants, we learned that you were always the voice of reason. You always provided great marital advice, and you were amazing at creating an environment that satisfied the needs of the membership, but at the same time nurturing the needs of those individuals at the same time. In those lines and along the lines of modeletics, how did you get the best out of your people?
Well, first of all, you have to identify the right one first. So if you can do that, you're off to a great start. And if you didn't do that, then your next most important thing is to replace that person. So hopefully you got to put a lot into the selection. And if I'm not sure, maybe sometime I'll go have dinner with them with my wife and their wife, and Reno will ask their wife some questions, and this has happened to a couple of them, and if their wife is not supportive of them in the golf business, we're going to have trouble.
Yep.
And so, because it's a difficult business for a wife if she's not got the right attitude. And so, anyway, that's maybe even during the work at Cherry Hills, sometimes Reno will talk to their wife and give them a pep talk. She's good at giving pep talks. Even for me, when I come home, and I've had a rough day or something, she can give me a pep talk and be supportive. So that's the biggest thing. And at Cherry Hills, we've got good resources there, and people and money and a great environment to work in, because the membership loves golf. And so that part of it has been the easy part, you might say, the resources that are around.
Okay. How did Modelnetics pull into all of that and helping you with the management and the leadership of the club?
Well, I took the class. It's a 20-week management course. I took it in 1978 at Dallas Country Club. One of the people with Mutual of New York talked me into going, and once a week for 20 weeks on a Wednesday morning. And really, one session on change and a couple of models made a huge difference to me. The progress principle of discovery and correction of an error and writing of a history so that you don't make the same mistake again. Mm-hmm. And as I evolved and went to Lakeway after 12 years at Dallas Country Club looking for a bigger challenge, I got a bigger challenge. And the fellow that talked me into getting into Modelnetics said, well, have you thought about teaching Modelnetics, or have you learned to teach Modelnetics yet? And I said, Jim, I hadn't even thought about it. I've been so busy. And as a matter of fact, the first 2 years, I think I played about 5 rounds of golf in the first 2 years, because it was totally a management of it was 3 golf courses, 300 slip marina, food and beverage, maintenance, the golf shop, 32 tennis courts. So it was a big operation, 2 different memberships. So I taught Modelnetics 3 times down at Lakeway, and it made a tremendous difference on the bottom line over a period of 5 years. So that, when you teach something, you learn it a lot better than when you just go through the class.
Sure.
So that's what made the difference and set the stage for my success at Cherry Hills.
Excellent. I had walked into Cherry one time, one of the times I was blessed to play the facility, and a member comes walking in, and he goes, "Something's amiss, boys, something's amiss," because he couldn't get the tee time that he wanted. Now, I think we probably may have all heard that maybe once or twice in our careers. As the head professional, how did you deal with individuals that were, well, let's just say they were difficult?
Well, first of all, you listen, and if it's a legitimate problem, you go ahead and act on it. And I always remember telling my staff, and some of the staff that are in here today, they remember this, that, if you don't take care of the customer in a normal business, then the customer just leaves you. Mm-hmm. They don't go back to the restaurant anymore. The restaurant goes broke, maybe, if they're poor operators. But in a club environment, you leave, they stay. And when you view it that way, it gives you a different perspective. So that's, you just have to take care of them. I mean, they're there. And I tried to make one time, this one incident at Dallas Country Club, this one fellow was just, for some reason, he was aggravating me a lot. And I said, I've got to figure out some way to not let that happen. Well, first of all, he was a high handicapper and he had a funny swing. So I got to thinking about how funny his swing was. So every time I saw him, I kind of got a smile on my face and thought about how funny his swing was. So he never bothered me again.
Outstanding. What motivated you? You've been doing this for a long time. We had some gentlemen with the Shaw Fountain Award who'd been doing this for an eternity. Extraordinary golf professionals. What motivated you to stay engaged all those years? 1 year to the next year to the next year, it kind of repeats itself. Yeah. What motivates you to stay there and to provide that type of service?
Well, I think everybody in the room can appreciate the fact that you've got to stay refreshed somehow. And each person's different in how they do that. some have hobbies that maybe keep them refreshed in another arena other than just their profession. So one thing that I kind of pulled off of a Los Angeles Dodgers manager, I think it was Lasorda, when I read that, I want a 1-year contract because I want to have to perform. And so my contract at Cherry Hills has always been 90 days either side. They can tell me in 90 days we don't want you, or I can tell them I'm leaving in 90 days. And so that's one thing that keeps you refreshed right there. There's a short fuse there, so you better perform. And then you have to look for things like going to seminars and the new people that you employ, or people that we go on golf trips with other members. And I listen more than talk because I pick up ideas from them of how they think about things. And most businesses refresh daily with new customers and new ideas in the business. We have a lot of new ideas, but we get them mostly from going to the merchandise show and seminars, and going to meetings like this, and pick up 1 or 2 things and use them. So it was a main focus of me to stay refreshed, and I've tried to relay that to the assistants to try to stay refreshed. And I think that's why a lot of them have done such a terrific job.
Well, and I appreciate that networking and that ability to share information. As Dave Steinmetz shared some information with me at one of the breaks, I'm like, that is brilliant. We're going to look into that right off the bat. And it's that ability to network with your individual group as well as your membership to create that experience for all of them.
Yeah.
Again, you've been doing this for some time. What's the biggest changes you've seen over the last 50 years or so?
Well, my dad was a golf professional, so I grew up around golf. And back then, it just seemed like it was mostly all green grass. You didn't have management companies. You didn't have the different retail outlets that we have now, and that's just evolved over the years. I remember one time we got real up about 4 or 5 of the pros, Joe Black and I and a couple other guys, when Wilson started selling product to another retail store, and we had to call the rep and sit down and visit about it, and that gave us a little better understanding, but we were still kind of disappointed we didn't get first shot at the markdowns.
Sure.
But still, that evolved, and now it's a different ball game, and you have to compete, and you have to meet the marketplace, which is the good thing about our capitalistic system. That forces you to stay refreshed a little bit. And so that all the different management companies, they built so many golf courses to sell lots that now we have PGM programs that supply a lot of the talent that we have around. I know I've been an active person with the PGM program from back when I was at Dallas Country Club, and they had the first one up in Michigan. So that it's just amazing, but you just have to keep evolving and stay refreshed and keep up. But I don't know, I didn't list all the things that have changed, but it's been a tremendous amount.
Yeah, and the advent of technology into, as T-Snap is here earlier with their point-of-sale based system and so forth, that is evolving faster than any of us can probably keep up with.
Well, you're right. I remember I was at Dallas Country Club when those computers came out, and I thought, boy, that'd be great to put the inventory on it on a computer. I worked a lot of late nights and then forgot about it and just did inventory every quarter back then because it was all manual. Didn't have any technology to just automatically make the journal entries.
Right. Let's turn a little bit more to your playing career. And by the way, as we get near the end here in about 15 minutes or so, if you have questions for Clayton, if that's acceptable, by all means write those down or text those in, and the staff will get them to us. So keep that in mind if something pops in your head. Going back to your playing career, played in 12 national championships, U.S. Open, PGA, U.S. Senior, PGA Senior, U.S. Amateur. Tell us about your experience in not only qualifying for this U.S. Senior Open, this one in particular, that you also hosted at the same time at Cherry Hills in that same year. And if I recall correctly, you played with Mr. Palmer and Mr. Nicholas in a round there.
That's correct.
And hosted the event and participated in the event. This is a pretty good week.
Yep. Well, there are a couple of things else. We ran the merchandise tent, the golf shop did, which we had a separate tent, and we did a terrific job and sold about $800,000 worth of stuff when you count the pre-sales and the sales during the week and things. And so that was successful, and the club and I were partners in that. Arnold Palmer called me about 2 weeks before the tournament, and I think he must do this to make a contact with the local professional. He's such a terrific guy, and I had met him one other time but did not know him. And so I said, Mr. Palmer, I'll be glad to get you a couple of tee times. What about me playing with you one day? He said, that's fine. Put Paul Spangler in and then get us another player, and we'll play on a couple of days. So we played Monday and Tuesday, and I knew John Brody pretty well, so I saw him on the sheet, and I put us down with John Brody. Then I saw Nicholas on the sheet, and I put us down with Nicholas for Tuesday. Well, I played real good that day, and Arnold and I beat them, and it was so funny. We put them out on 17, and Jack told me walking across the bridge from 17 green to 18 tee, Clayton, we're pressing to get even on 18. So we had them down for $40. And I said to Arnold as we got to 18 tee, and it was the first tee, right, that you come to. Kind of crowded there, and we had a nice gallery following. And Arnold said, oh, Clayton, that'll be fine, as loud as he could. Jack never pays his bets anyway. And then so anyway, we ended up winning the last hole, and so I made the cut in the tournament, and Rena and I were talking to Barbara Nicholas at the ballroom when Jack finished his press conference and came back up. And he said, saw us over there, and he detoured, and he came over, and he says, hey, you want to match cards today? I don't think so. So anyway, that was a fun experience and a highlight, maybe I would say, of my career at Cherry Hills, other than all the assistants that I had over the years that have done such a terrific job.
Yeah, tremendous success throughout the
And
country.
the membership there is so, they like the BMW, set all kind of records because of the membership.
Right. And Mr. Zinn is one of those, if I
He
recall
is.
correctly.
Yep.
We're talking about playing. Share us your thoughts on the importance of playing as a PGA member, whether that be competitively or keeping the game in play.
So how do
Your
you keep
thoughts, how important is the playing aspect?
Playing
Because
aspect?
as we get pulled more and more into the business
Yep.
aspect, the admin aspect of it,
Yep.
of taking care of guests, taking care of junior leagues and,
Yep.
and the classes, et cetera, the business, the merchandise for some of us, we're getting pulled in a lot of different
That's
directions.
correct.
What's the part of playing involved anymore?
Well, it varies from job to job, I think. At Dallas Country Club and at Cherry Hills, it was an important part of the job, I felt like. The committees and the board felt like it was an important part of the job to have a good playing staff. I was fortunate enough to have played well enough young when I started working at Cherry Hills, I already had a pretty decent golf game. So that part of it worked for Cherry Hills. But when I went to Lakeway, like I mentioned, I probably played 5 times the first 2 years because it was a totally management job. So it didn't require playing. Right. We had an academy, but I wasn't involved in running the Academy of Golf. I was over the Academy of Golf. Your job, I don't know how much playing is required at a daily fee course. Sometimes it isn't as much, and it depends on your personal desire, personal goals. So playing varies with every job, and you have to understand if you're the right fit for that job. You shouldn't take it if you want to play a whole lot. You better get in a job where you can play a whole lot. Because anyway, we don't make much money playing anyway, winning these tournaments. John Ogden won the Sexton Championship, won $8,000, gave half of it away. Well, he makes a lot more than that at his job.
Sure.
Yeah.
But what a tremendous thing for. As I look at John, though, that's not a $40 bet with Nicholas and Palmer, although that story certainly is going to go a long ways. But he gives away half of his winnings. What does that say about? I mean, what does that make you feel like as a mentor to him and as a friend of his?
I was so excited. Number one, that he won that tournament. He's done such a terrific job there at Cherry Hills, and he's a great player. And for a guy his age to win that tournament, that's pretty fun.
One of your former assistants shared with us that the biggest lesson they learned from you was to always push yourself, to learn as much as possible, and never settle for the status quo. Clayton, this is still one of the cutting edges of anything that can add value to a club, to a staff, or to himself. You would never were afraid to do new things or try new methods. Why do you think that's so important? And I know we've touched on it a little bit. But
well, staying refreshed, number one. Right. And number one, you don't want the industry to go by you, because as a pro at a private club, you can kind of let your guard down for a year or two and you're still going to have a job. But in 4 or 5 years, you're going to look around and say, wow, the industry went right by me. I don't even know how to open a computer, much less use one. And so the electronic tee times, the computer part of it, all of those things, you have to force yourself to stay refreshed. And I think this is something that made one of the biggest differences in my career. And a gentleman at Dallas Country Club told me this back in the late 70s. And I've remembered it just like it was yesterday. Most of what you accomplish in life will be through discipline. And that's when I realized, when he told me that was like Warren Smith. He was so disciplined. He'd come in at the same time in the morning, he'd play golf, have lunch at the same time, go home at the same time. But I didn't realize how disciplined he was, and that's why he had such a great career there and at the clubs he's been prior to that, because he was a disciplined person. So you think back on it, and most of what you've accomplished will be through discipline, and I bet you, whether it's fitness or diet or work or family, it'll be through discipline. So that made a big, big difference for me. And that also, because I only had a 90-day contract, so to speak, that gave me some incentive to stay up on the business. So I tried to do things in my own best interest, and if it was in my best interest, I thought it would be helpful. But I also feel like I made decisions at Cherry Hills and at Dallas Country Club that was for the best interest of the club, because I felt like if the club was put first on those decisions, that I would benefit in the long run, and that worked out.
And I think Scott had mentioned that type of thing during his Vic Klein Award, was putting the needs of others or service to others ahead of oneself, and how that comes back to you, which I believe is a great quote. And I've heard that, and every time I hear that, Scott, it really resonates, and I appreciate that. Real quick, rapid fire. I'm going to throw out some words. Just tell me what first comes to mind. The crossed number sevens.
Oh, that's a little entertainment in our shop. You know, some write down the number 7, and sometimes it looks like a 2 to me. So I said, why you do that? Why you write those 7s like that? Of course, they learned it when they were young in school, but I just kind of did it for my own entertainment.
The words, no problem.
Yeah, well, that was a big problem for me. I mean, why couldn't you say my pleasure or thank you or I enjoy doing that or something? You go to the Broadmoor, it was my pleasure to do that for you, not no problem. That's a problem for me.
Right.
And so that was one of the things that, yeah, the staff knew not to say that.
Also, probably along those lines, this next one, a bunch.
Oh, yeah, we had a merchandise buyer and girl there, and I'd ask her how certain shirts were selling or whatever, and she'd say, well, we've sold a bunch of those. And I said, well, those bananas come in bunches. How about give me a number? And so when we finally went to an open-to-buy program, which was in 92, my second year there, because I found out that retailers have an open-to-buy program, so you know how many goods to deliver so that you can meet your sales goal and then meet your annual sales goal. And so we started in 92, and we used it the whole time, and John still uses a program, open-to-buy. So now we have specific numbers, but I wouldn't let her get away with that.
One of those that's my pet peeve, and my staff's very well aware of it, is just a second. Well, that's gone.
Yeah, now what?
Yeah. So we use a moment because, like a bunch, it's sort of vague, but I could leave you on hold for 30 seconds or 45 seconds, and it wasn't just a second. One last word for you. Character.
Well, I guess if you don't have that, you got to stand for something, or else you'll fall for anything, like the old country and western song goes. But I think my dad instilled in me honesty, and as I've gone along, I finally got it when I was in college, and that's made my career a lot easier, is honesty with the staff, with your customers, with yourself, with your family. That's make a big difference. One of the things that we talk about people mentoring, I have to say a couple of words about Golf Tech, because Rudy Zupetz needed some help with his teaching. He had gotten married. He was not going the winter to California again. His wife had a nice job. And so we did an indoor teaching for 5 months. And Rudy did the business plan. I helped him put it together. And we ended up making money in 5 months. I split it with him because I told him I'd take the losses and split the profits, but I just wanted him to get better at teaching. So I happened to have the resources so I could help him. And Joe Ossel had worked for me in '93. And I called him after those 4 months were up, and said, Joe, what are you doing now that you've graduated? You just graduated, right? And he said, yeah, but my job, it didn't really work out that I thought it was going to have. So I said, well, look, we made money in 5 months with an indoor teaching. Let's see what we can do with it. You want to come run that? And that's how Golf Tech started. And now it's the largest employer in the PGA of America. I'm happy to say that. I sit on the sidelines and own just a teeny bit of stock, and Joe and another fellow run the whole company, but it's just phenomenal what they've done in the teaching arena and provided more golfers. I would also like to say that, and I was telling this story just earlier, I have 2 grandsons that play golf now. I have 6 grandkids, and these 2 the only ones that really play. One's 17 now at Heritage High School, and one is 12, and both went to Cherry Hills Christian. So the older one, when he was in the 7th and 8th grade, they had maybe, I would say, 10 or 12 players playing golf, and I would go out and help them at Broken Tee from time to time. 5 years later, my other grandson's there. They have 35 people playing golf. They have to have 3 courses. And so things that are happening in Colorado, I'm on the Colorado Golf Association board and head of the Colorado Golf Foundation, and trying to inspire young people in the classroom and on the course across Colorado, and work. Ed Mate and Eddie Ainsworth have worked so well together and have done so much for the promotion of golf. And the Junior Golf Alliance of Colorado is a great example. It's probably a model that the country will use. But when you have 2 groups that are very active in golf, like those 2, and Ed Mate used to work as our tournament director in the section, as most of you will remember. He's now been running the Colorado Golf Association. So those 2 guys got together, and look what's happened to golf. And so now maybe we can fill up some of those courses that they built for selling lots. Maybe we can fill them up with golfers as things go along. But I just see bright things for golf in Colorado, and I think, and Jim, like you mentioned, for the national level also. And that's been exciting to see all of that. So yeah, I've done quite a bit of volunteer work. I'm on the grounds committee at Cherry Hills and have been for this is my 5th year. It's been great working with John and Mike Burke and the current chairman of whoever the committee has on the committee. So I just keep trying to give back a little bit, but stay active so I can stay a little younger than my actual age.
Understood. We do obviously have a great relationship and a great partnership with the CGA. As was shared earlier with Ty, a great number of things going on in the section, from golf in schools to the PGA Junior League, et cetera, et cetera. Lots of things for us to be proud of. And this is a difficult question, I know, for you, because you've got the successes of the championships, the playing career, the tenure at Cherry Hills. You've got the success of Golf Tech and a couple of other businesses that you're involved in. If you could put a finger on it, which thing are you most proud of? If there's one thing you could say, this was sort of the highlight, this was the crowning moment of, this was something special, what would that be?
Well, I don't know if I could do it like that. I do know that probably the thing that's meant the most to me, that I'm worked in the career where I have my passion, that's been the biggest thing. Because if you have a passion for what you're doing, a lot of things get easy. And if you don't, man, it's tough to go through the day. And so I was real fortunate. I went back from graduating from University of Houston. I went back to Monroe, Louisiana, and started selling life insurance. But if I worked 5 or 6 hours a day, I felt like I worked 12. I said, I better try that golf business. My dad didn't push me at it. And so I went to work in the golf business and worked 12 hours and felt like I worked 5 or 6. So I said, this must be the right thing. And it has been the right thing for me because that was my passion. I qualified to go on the tour. Wasn't very successful for 8 months. Found that out pretty quick. Was married already, had kids. And so I was fortunate enough to go at the same time, interview at Southern Hills and Cherry Hills, and offered the job. And I picked Cherry Hills because I thought Warren Smith was a better mentor. And it worked out great.
I would say,
Yeah. Because, so I'd say the thing I'm most proud of is having a passion for what I did. And then another thing that's been the most fun is meeting guys like Arnold Palmer. So I qualified for 2 more senior opens. I called him to try to play a practice round with him, and he let me do that. And meeting Byron Nelson in Dallas, Texas, what a phenomenal guy he was, and got to be a good friend of his. So when you have those experiences, it really puts the icing on the cake of your job. But that's the thing golf does for us. It puts us in a good environment, and we can do so much for others, and therefore we do it for ourselves too.
Yeah, very much so. We've got professionals in the audience, PGM students who are just embarking on their career, others who have just joined in membership, embarking on their career. Some of us are maybe midway through, maybe a little further than midway. Others still getting closer to retirement. What would your advice be first to those folks that are just entering into the business?
Well, you better be sure you have a passion for it. And then you better meet well, first of all, we have so many opportunities in different arenas for the PGA now than we had way back there. Mm-hmm. So that's good. And when you're that young, you can try it. You know, I tried selling life insurance. I tried the tour. You know, I wasn't any good at either one of those. And then I got in the club business, and it worked out because I'd been around, I guess my background being around it all my young life, it helped. So have a passion for it, but look for the area that fits you the best is what I would say.
That fit is key.
Yeah.
You can't have a passion for something that doesn't really work with you.
That's correct.
For those in midway through their career, at that halfway point.
Yeah, I would start off by saying, number one, continue the passion, stay refreshed. More than anything else, you have to stay refreshed or it gets too boring. It's too tough. Too tough to get up.
Right.
In a hurry to get back away from it. That's no good.
So tough to get up might apply to those of us who are getting closer to the retirement portion of it. What would your advice be to that person that has 2, 3, 5 years in their golf career left?
Well, stay in good shape because it takes a lot of energy to do this business. That's all I can tell you. It takes a lot of energy. And I wish that picture up there was one of my younger years because that's pitiful up there, that swing. That's kind of how I play now with no club head speed. But yeah, I mean, you'll know when it's time to say I quit maybe, and if you don't, I felt like that I didn't know if I had enough energy to do the job at the level I'd like to do it. And I didn't want to take a chance of performing that way at a club like Cherry Hills.
Sure. No, understandably. For the PGA professionals in the room today, if there was one thing you would encourage all of us to do more of, what would that one thing be?
Wow, that's pretty personal on which they'd do more of. But once again, I'm going to stick on my theme of stay refreshed and enjoy your job, because if you're not doing that, you better look for another one. And golf is growing now, so I think there's great opportunities for everyone in the room, and maybe not as the position they're in now, but for others. Just what Keith said earlier on that panel discussion. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of opportunities in golf, and he can help direct you. So, yeah, call Keith. Keith, hope you get a lot of calls here soon.
Create that right fit for that person.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I personally think you made a good choice in not going into the insurance industry. It's worked out well here, and we sincerely appreciate you spending time with us today. It's a great honor to have you as our guest.
It's been my pleasure.
Questions from anyone in the audience? If you just raise your hand, the staff will grab a microphone for you if you have a question for Clayton. Yes, sir.
quite catch all that.
The question was, in your time in Texas, did you ever happen to bump into Mr. Trevino and have a story surrounding Mr. Trevino?
Yes, I do. I have. This is how you realize how good those guys are. So I was talking to one of the fellows that knew Lee real well over at Royal Oaks. We were playing over there, and he said, Lee never has played Dallas Country Club. I said, well, I'll just invite him out. So we invited Lee out, and on the fourth hole, it's a par 5, and you drive over the hill, and there's about a 25-yard flat area, and then you shoot your next shot to the green toward the par 5. It's hard to reach in 2 because they cut your drive off. So he's walking up to the tee with a driver, and he says, I said, Lee, you don't need a driver here. It's only 235 to the creek. So he said, that's all right, I'll hit this. Teed it up, patted that foot 3 times, boom, right down there. It sounded so solid, as all of his shots did. I said, that might be in the ditch. Nope, that's 10 yards short. We got down there, it was 10 yards short. They can control distance on a driver about as well as I do on a putter. That's all I can tell you that much. But another funny thing that happened with Lee, Rena and I had checked in at the Old Course Hotel, and we were taking a group over to Scotland. And we had just gotten in the room and knock on the door. And I go to the door, and it was Lee Trevino. He's walking down the hall, sees the keys in the door, and knocked on the door. He said, here are your keys. You left them in the lock. And that's a freaky thing that all of a sudden, here's Lee Trevino that's in Dallas, Texas, and I see him in St. Andrews. He was great. I mean, I didn't get a chance to visit with him a whole lot in the Senior Open in '93, but, I feel like I know him well enough to go up and say hello to him and enjoy a conversation or two. We did that at Arnold Palmer's services, visited. He was telling me how great this one course had been done in Dallas, Texas. You got to come back and play it, he says. There's a guy, he and Palmer, they just liked to hit golf balls. Right. They were in the right profession. They had a passion for it.
It's a good fit.
Yeah, good fit.
Jim, we've had a bunch of questions texted in. Clayton, how did you maintain a work-life balance through all your years at Cherry Hills?
How did I do what with the work lifestyle?
Maintain a work-life balance?
Well, Rena just said I worked all the time. That was my lifestyle. But you've got to have a good wife and be supportive. I just enjoyed it, and I like getting up, and I like to try to find out new things, trial and error. That's how you make progress, discovery and correction of a problem. I'll give you one thing that was fun for me. In modelnetics, there's kind of 4 stages of problems. You have problem avoidance, which is avoiding the problem altogether. You have problem identification. So what problem are we going to tackle? Usually people either tackle one they know how to fix, or one is so much of a monster they have to see it. And then problem selection. And then the last one is problem solution. And so I think one of the things that we worked on hard at Cherry Hills that was fun is how do we keep avoiding problems? I mean, some of them, of course, you can't avoid at all, but a lot of them you can. And the question would be, do we need to do more training, or do we need to change our methods a little bit? Because it either is a person problem or a systems problem. So that was a big thing, and it sure makes the job easier. So that's easier to work those long hours if you don't have so many problems.
Another one, you keep mentioning modelnetics, and a couple people have said, I still use modelnetics that I learned from Clayton, the Pesos formula, and a couple other ones. Could we get you to do modelnetics again here in Colorado?
Well, I don't know. Eddie went to the class. He's a graduate of the class. It's online now, and I don't know whether I would or not. It depends on the demand. It takes a lot to prepare for it because it's now a 16-week course, and you do it for an hour and a half with no notes because that's the idea. Those models jog your memory, and you come up with ideas. So modelnetics is 151 models in different categories. You teach it by a session, so change, selection, evaluation, compensation, delegation, motivation, planning, the management process, communications, learning and training, control, problem solving, decision making, and then leadership. So you can see it covers a wide range of management. And I read a lot of self-help books up until 1978, and I still have read a few since then, but that's been my main guideline, is reviewing models, because it's just designed to give you guides to thought or action. So, for example, I get calls from time to time from past assistants. I'll say John Ogden, he probably has called me more than anybody when he was down at the country club at Castle Pines. Boy, I was glad I didn't have that job, John. That was a challenge down there. But anyway, I wouldn't tell them what to do. I would just give them some ideas. And they're on the firing line. They've got to make the decision, and they've got to live with the decision. So it's just a good way to give you a guide. It's a PESOS formula. It's the 5 steps in skill training. Prepare somebody, explain it to them, show them how to do it, and then observe them doing it, and then just supervise them after that. So that was always used in training when you have a new person coming on. And I know John uses that model. That's what I say, 1 or 2 models sometimes can make a big difference. Okay, that it?
Outstanding. Thank you. Anything else from the crowd? Well, on behalf of all of us, thank you for spending the time with us
Hey, Jim,
today.
we've got one more.
One more. Paul, I'm sorry. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Clayton Cole.
Well,
Thank you, sir.
thank you.